episode of the Maple Pill. As always, I'm your host, Matt McKeever. And actually, before we dive into tonight's episode, I've got a quick question for you guys. And that question is, did the intro here start up normally? I had a weird kind of warning that popped up on my end. So let me know if you can hear and see me and if everything's good, because I don't know. StreamYard seems to be acting up a little bit. So let me know in the comment section if you guys can actually hear and see me right now, because they said they were having some problems with their live streaming. But anyways, hopefully I am live. Hopefully you guys can watch and hear and see me. And tonight we're going to be talking about Justin Trudeau, him being called out on the world stage, in particular in the European Parliament. That's always a fan favorite, or always one of my favorite things, to see Trudeau called out on his hypocrisy when he's talking about the importance of democracy for other people, but he really doesn't care for it that much at home, right? In fact, we've heard from him in the past that, you know, he respects China as a world leader there, and he actually is jealous of China's basic dictatorship, because he'd be able to get a lot more done if he didn't have to worry about, you know, our opinions, our thoughts, our feelings, and our desires as citizens of the country that, you know, he's actually supposed to work for us. But anyways, we'll get into that in a little bit. We're also going to be doing a quick update on Ukraine and Russia and the conflict going on in Ukraine. In addition, we've got a full course of pills to cover tonight. So, of course, we've got the blue pill, the red pill, the black pill, the clown pill, and finally we'll end on the white pill. Enough of my preamble, though. Let's jump into it. So this is from AP News. Putin wants unfriendly countries to pay rubles for gas. And you guys have heard me talking about this for a while now, and I just want to highlight one more time why I think this is so important. A lot of people, when they look at the United States, when they look at Western countries in general, they don't understand that, you know, the fact that the US dollar is the world's reserve currency not only, you know, really strengthens the United States and their position on the world stage, it actually has, you know, tangential or side benefits to other countries like Canada as well. And so because of the power behind the dollar and the fact that essentially the vast majority of world trade is transacted in that US dollar, we all benefit from that in the West. And what I personally think that we're seeing right now, and this was occurring even before the Ukraine-Russia conflict, but it seems like it's expediting what's going on, is we're seeing a decoupling from the US dollar being used as the primary default reserve currency. So this story here is Putin wants unfriendly countries to pay rubles for gas. We've already heard about how India is buying oil directly from Russia. I believe in the previous story we were covering, they got a 20% discount. Again, they weren't using US dollars. I think that this isolation policy that we're implementing right now in regards to all the different economic sanctions on Russia probably will have long-term consequences. Of course, it's going to have long-term consequences, but I think it's going to have even more significant long-term consequences than a lot of people realize. And those are going to be economic consequences as we continue to see the hastening of the decoupling of the US dollar as the world reserve currency. We're going to see a lot of the strength of the United States eroding. And while that doesn't mean immediately their military is going to be compromised or any of their institutions, it's one of those things where, you know, earlier today I was listening to someone talk, and they were talking about how dams break. And a lot of people overestimate how quickly the dam's going to break. But once the dam breaks, they underestimate how quickly all that water is actually going to come out. And obviously, this is just an analogy, but I really feel like that analogy applies to the US dollar as the world reserve currency. And I think it's something a lot of us should be paying attention to. And if you want to insulate or protect yourself, I really think this is the time, this is the excuse, this is the reason that us Canadians need in order to start getting orange pilled. And a reminder, orange pill, that refers to going down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. So if you guys want to dive deeper down that, a reminder, last year I actually put on a 2-hour free conference just talking about Bitcoin and essentially me trying to orange pill Canadians. So all you need to Google is like SOS BTC or Matt McKeever Bitcoin. It'll be one of the first results you guys see. And link to this AP article and all the articles we're discussing today in the video description down below, as always. Next, let's get into our first blue pill story of the day. And good news, everyone. Quebec has solved inflation because Quebec is now budgeting giving $500 handouts and more health care to all of its citizens to help combat inflation. And anyone with even a cursory understanding of economics and economic policy understands that the government giving away free money isn't actually going to solve anything in regards to inflation. This is just, if this isn't outright buying votes for the fall election, this is just a band-aid solution, right? This isn't even triage, in my opinion. Quebec will give $500 to everyone who makes $100,000 or less as a way to offset the rising cost of living the government announced in its budget for the coming fiscal year, tabled Tuesday in the National Assembly. In all, about 6.4 million taxpayers will receive the handout, a one-time payment that represents a $3.2 billion expenditure for the province. And understand, Quebec, just like the federal government, is running at a deficit. And this is going to significantly compound that deficit that they're currently running on. And while $500 might be a short-term boon for individual citizens, this is not any sort of solution to inflation. And in fact, I understand why a lot of Twitter pundits right now are asking or questioning whether this will actually just speed things up, right? And I personally think that we're going to continue to see an erosion in the purchasing power of Canadian dollars. We're going to see inflation continue here. And this impacts everyone, right? This is going to impact your grocery bill. This is going to impact your utilities, all the different facets of cost of living. But in addition to that, as we discussed in yesterday's stories, I think it was yesterday, maybe 2 days ago, I personally think we're going to see a lot more strikes, a lot more unions pushing back on agreements that have already been made. Because as we enter a higher and higher inflation rate, people that have a guaranteed 2% or 3% raise per year to keep up with inflation are going to find themselves extremely frustrated with that because it's not actually going to do shit for them. And looking a little bit further into this article from CBC, the cash back dismissed as electoral ploy. So the opposition parties in Quebec's National Assembly dismissed the payments as a ploy by Premier François Legault, CAQ government to get votes ahead of the fall election. Yeah, I really think this is the sort of grandstanding that we would expect from politicians. And understand right now, Quebec isn't projected to have a balanced budget for at least 6 years. And when we often look at governments and projecting when they're going to get to balanced budgets, it seems like there's always a little bit of delay, or they overestimate how quickly they're going to balance their budget. So Quebec is only expected to return to a balanced budget 6 years from now in 2027 to 28. And understand right now, their current upcoming deficit stands at $6.5 billion. So again, this new measure, which is another, $3.2 billion, this is going to have a significant impact on the deficit that Quebec is going to find themselves in. But it seems like, our federal government doesn't care about the fact that we're $1 trillion in debt now. Again, let that sink in, $1 trillion. Growing up, the word trillion, I don't even think I ever heard, right? Maybe the first time I was introduced to the word was on The Simpsons. I think, was there like $1 trillion bill or $1 trillion coin that I think Mr. Burns steals, if I remember correctly? But yeah, this wasn't common verbiage even just a few decades ago. And now all of a sudden, we're just shrugging like these deficits don't matter whatsoever. Next from the National Post, no end in sight for federal COVID-19 restrictions, Health Minister tells Commons Committee. The truth is that COVID-19 is still here in Canada and certainly outside of Canada. And that's what I think we should be mindful of, Duclos said, or told the Commons Health Committee. This is, and you guys likely, if you've been following for a while, you know my political opinion here, but this has nothing to do with safety. This is, at best, in my opinion, if I want to give the government all the benefit of the doubt, this is them, creating policy based upon polls. And so because they're being told by pollsters that a lot of Canadians will put up with this, and some Canadians really want these measures to stay in place, that's what they're choosing to do. That's about as white hat as I can frame what's going on here. If you guys think I'm missing the point or the plot, let me know. If I wanted to frame this as black hat, this is the government just trying to see how much can they get away with. How big a tyrants can they be? How quickly can they implement something like, a great reset, where they can make sure that you own nothing and they'll demand your happiness and compliance, or else, you'll own nothing, so you really can't do squat shit about it. Further on from this National Post article, what different information does the federal government have that is causing it to not provide dates or a plan that will see federal COVID mandates lifted? Barrett asked. And yeah, it's actually a very simple question, right? Can you show us any sort of guidelines here? Again, originally you guys were throwing around like 70% vaccination status would be more than enough. And now, we're seeing at least claims that, 80, 90% of Canadians, depending upon exactly how those demographics are chopped up, are vaccinated. So why the hell do we find ourselves still in this moment in time while it appears that the vast majority of the rest of the world is opened up completely or in the process of really starting to open up? And again, it's okay for our prime minister to go about gallivanting, but we can't imagine allowing unvaccinated Canadians to travel freely as they see fit, because they're not adults. They shouldn't be allowed to make their own personal decisions. The truth is that COVID-19 is still here in Canada and certainly outside of Canada, and that's what I think we should be mindful of, he said. So again, they're just going to focus on this fact COVID still exists, and they're constantly willing to trade our freedoms for safety. And again, the only reason I believe that they're doing this is because they're essentially creating policy based upon what pollsters are telling them. Canadians just want a plan, he said. All they're asking for every single day is what is it going to take for us to see the mandates end. To be responsible means that you need to follow the evidence, the science, and the precautionary principles and adjust and analyze the policies as things evolve. He said that was too close there, the second comment. And so again, but you can't actually point to us and tell us what the science tells you in regards to what thresholds need to be met or at what point in time it's actually safe to go back and start living normal lives. And yeah, I don't know. I've got travel plans for mid to late May. Really hope Canadians get our freedoms back before then, because it's going to be a giant pain in my ass otherwise. Next, this is from MSN. Canadians favor hybrid work amid COVID-19. Can employers force them back? First, this is just shocking to me, even how global news is choosing to frame this, right? And I think we're going to see more and more pushing of this perspective and narrative that while employees shouldn't be allowed to make their own medical choices, they should be allowed to choose their work environment. And this just seems so bizarre to me, right? The employer should be able to dictate where you work, but they shouldn't be able to dictate your medical choices. And yet we live in the upside down world where it's the exact opposite. And we're essentially being beaten over the head by mainstream media to just believe that this is for our own good. And so they'll throw us a bone like, hey, maybe you can work from home, but hey, you still need to make all the medical decisions we tell you to do. Next, this is from CTV News, and this brings me into our first red pill story of the day. Zexi Lee, symbol of resistance to Freedom Convoy, given City Builder Award. And so it's important to understand that the propaganda war against the Freedom Trucker Convoy is still going strong in the mainstream media and amongst politicians because they'll never admit the truth. I literally think that this is a hill they're willing to die on. They'd rather die on these lies than ever have to admit the truth to the average Canadian citizen. This is from the mayor of Ottawa. With governments at all levels paralyzed to see a peaceful and quick end to this occupation, Mrs. Lee stepped up and took action when the public needed it most, Mayor Jim Watson said in presenting the award. She emerged as a brave community leader who stood up for justice and peace in the face of some very angry people. So again, understand, under no past circumstances, and I can't think of a single example, and you guys let me know in the comments section, but I don't believe there's a single example where a counter protester or an individual that was trying to squash the expression, like freedom of expression amongst their fellow citizens, were ever awarded, keys to the city, were ever even put up on a pedestal up until this moment in time, right? And the only reason is because it doesn't align with Trudeau and his political narrative. And so mainstream media is so comfortable at this point in time just saying anyone that disagrees with us is the enemy and must be demonized. It's actually wild when you think about it, right? And this is the sort of stuff I think we'd only expect even a decade ago from tin pot dictators, right? From banana republics. The proposed class action lawsuit that Lee is actually heading here has grown to more than $300 million. So understand they've created a class action lawsuit against the Freedom Trucker Convoy and the organizers of it. Again, I've never heard of anything like this ever happening before in Canada. And understand, even if you absolutely disagree with what the policies of the Freedom Trucker Convoy want to see, which was really just Canadians being given back their freedom, but even if you disagree with the idea that Canadians should be allowed to be free, have freedom of mobility, not have to live under the tyranny of medical mandates, this will eventually be used against your side as well. And so again, whenever we're kind of focusing on policies, it's important not just to think of how it serves us in our current needs, but how it could actually be used against us. And unfortunately, right now, a lot of the lefts, a lot of people that would have considered themselves like radical left, are more than happy to just clap at this movement towards tyranny because they think that the tyrants will serve them. But the tyrants will only serve them as long as they serve the tyrants. Again, this isn't going to end well for any Canadian, and these are dangerous precedents that are being set. Next, this is from Fee Stories. And so this is the results of St. Paul's rent control experiment are in, and they're disastrous. Now, again, I've done a whole separate video on my old YouTube channel, the Canadian Real Estate channel, and there's a link in the video description down below. This is actually back when I was doing daily news stories as well, back in 2019. Feels like a lifetime ago because that was in a pre-COVID era. But essentially, in this video, I broke down all the different studies and understand that the vast majority, like we're talking more than 90% of economists agree that, yeah, rent control, rent subsidies, government intervention in the real estate market doesn't actually result in a net benefit for anyone. But why should that stop policymakers, right? Why should they actually get hung up on the facts here? And this presumption that government will fix our problems is what's getting us into every single problem we find ourselves with right now. From the article, I just wanted to highlight some of the key findings. And as well, these are highlighted in a book. So in his book, Basic Economics, economist Thomas Sowell painstakingly documents the destructive results of rent control policies around the world. A Swedish economist once quipped that rent control appears to be the most efficient technique presently known to destroy a city, except for bombing. Again, let that sink in. You know, like, yeah, I guess if we bomb a city flat, it's probably worse off than rent control. But rent control is a close second. Here are just a few examples he offers, which I've condensed. In Melbourne, Australia, not one housing unit was built for 9 years. Not one housing unit for 9 years, because rent control laws had destroyed the profit motive. Again, somehow these progressives seem to live in this echo chamber where they think they can disincentivize people to do things and then still just demand that those people do those things. No, people respond to incentives. They respond to actually having a self-interest. And when you completely remove that from the equation, you completely remove any sort of motivation to want to participate in the market. In Santa Monica, California, in 1979, the number of building permits dropped by 90% in just a few years because, again, rent control laws had destroyed the incentive to create new housing. Now, what happens when supply completely dries up? Nothing good for the average consumer. In the 1970s, residents in Washington, D.C. saw housing stock decline from 199,000 to less than 176,000. Why? Because many people decided to stop renting their homes because of price controls. And honestly, I think we're going to see, now that the Liberals and NDP are, doing backdoor shenanigans with each other, I suspect that we're going to see them try and push out all sorts of crazy new rules and regulations for our own good on the real estate market that's going to have serious long-term unintended consequences, not unlike what's laid out here in the book Basic Economics. So again, link to this story in the video description down below, link to my video where essentially I dismantle and dismiss the concept of rent control. And as always, if you check out here, oh, look at that, all of the links, right? So again, this has been well known and well studied since the 80s, but yet every 10 years, we see governments trying to implement the same old policies because similar to Quebec wanting to just give away $500, they think that if they make these platitudes and promises that they'll be able to buy enough votes to continue to stay in power. And they'll come up with some new excuse for why their policies didn't fix it and why they need to implement more rules and more regulations. And if they could ever just get a few more policies in place, it will magically fix all the problems. Next, from the Fraser Institute, the Supreme Court of Canada and Trans-Boundary Indigenous Rights claims understand the implications of the 2021 decision in DeSoto. I hadn't really heard of this, but as I started digging into it, I was like, yeah, this sounds like a very bad idea. While the case raises many other issues, including some complex issues related to the interpretation of Section 35, there are three key practical ramifications of the case that warrant attention. The case indirectly both extends and complicates the duty to consult. While trying to avoid the issue, the case nonetheless expands possible grounds for claims by Indigenous rights to mobility across the Canada-US border and Canada-Greenland border. The case raises the possibility of various cross-border rights claims, including even the possibility of title claims in Canada by Indigenous communities located in the United States. And this just if I didn't know all the other clown shenanigans that our government implements, this would be shocking to me. But in this day and age, it's just kind of par for the course. Next, this is kind of the highlight story here. This is Trudeau being dressed down this first one is Trudeau addressing the EU Parliament. And then after that, we're going to get into different politicians calling Trudeau out on his bullshit. But let's actually listen to him talk about democracy here. And I can't help but feel like either he's incapable of understanding his own hypocrisy, or how it seems like he says the opposite of what he does. But you guys let me know.
And debates as weakness. But what he has never understood is that the rigors of debate, that forceful civic engagement, is what makes us strong.
Oh, sorry, guys. What the hell happened there? Okay. Sorry, I must have accidentally clicked something and closed it. But anyways, just Trudeau going on about how democracy makes us strong. Well, he literally did everything to undermine democracy here in Canada. That was strange. Did that go over here? No. Okay. Anyways, let's get into the main point here. And this was a member. Is this my? Okay, sorry. I'm just having a brain cramp. It just reset.
Democracy was weak. He saw our disagreements and debates as weakness. But what he has never understood is that the rigors of debate, that forceful civic engagement, is what makes us strong. And that democracy, at its best, will always be stronger than authoritarianism. But if we're going to be honest, and we need to be honest in this place, we haven't always been at our best these past years. Putin thought we were divided. He thought he could weaken the EU and NATO. He miscalculated, and he is seeing it backfire. NATO and the EU are now more resolved and united than ever, because all of us in this room who are committed to democracy know in our bones that democracy didn't happen by accident, and it will not continue without deliberate, mindful effort.
So there's a lot here to actually unpack. The first thing I want to highlight for you guys is the way mainstream media portrayed this is that Justin Trudeau received a standing ovation from a packed EU Parliament. But if you guys were paying attention to a few of those moments where they showed the crowd, it is far from packed. In fact, it looks like it's less than 20% occupied. And there's an awkward pause where he finishes his speech, and like one person's like, "Oh shit, I think we're supposed to clap here." And then what feels like just a very modest clapping occurs. But what's fascinating here is what feels like just Trudeau projecting himself and the shit he's caused here in Canada onto Putin. Now, again, that doesn't make Putin a good guy, but understand that when he's talking about democracy is us at our best, well, shouldn't that be the right to protest as well? Shouldn't you be willing to meet with protesters in your own country? When he talks about the authoritarians and them being weaker than Democrats and liberals, essentially, well, why did you act like an authoritarian and try and shut down any sort of open discourse? Why do you immediately jump to straw man arguments and just name calling of anyone that's your political opponent? Again, I shouldn't expect anything better from him, but it is very frustrating just to hear him speak with such confidence in regards to his lying. But thankfully, we have this member of European Parliament and former judge saying out loud, very loudly, what needs to be said and what people need to hear. I believe he is a member from Croatia.
Dear colleagues, dear citizens, Prime Minister Trudeau, freedom, the right of choice, the right to freedom, the right to work. For many of us, these are basic, fundamental human rights that millions of people across Europe and across the world have given their lives. in order to defend our rights and the rights of our children, rights that we have fought for centuries. Many of us, including me, myself personally, are ready and willing to risk our own freedom and to lay down our own lives. Unfortunately, today among us, there are also those who want to trample those basic rights. Canada, once a symbol of the modern.
And so I just want to highlight here, the reason he turns around and looks back is because Justin Trudeau is sitting right behind him. So literally, as he's calling out Justin Trudeau, he turns around to make eye contact. I love it.
Modern world is under your quasi-liberal leadership, and over the past few months, it has become a symbol of violating basic human rights and civic freedoms. We have witnessed women being trampled by horses, single parents being their bank accounts are being blocked so that they cannot pay for their children's schools, they cannot pay for medicine, they cannot pay their electricity bills, their water bills, they cannot pay the debts they have, their mortgages. For you, maybe these are liberal methods, but for many citizens across the world, this is a dictatorship of the worst kind. Be assured that the citizens of the world, when united, can stop any regime that wants to abolish the freedom of citizens, whether by bombs or by harmful medicine. Thank you.
So again, just really appreciate that, and really appreciate him literally turning around to look at Justin Trudeau's masked face as he gave that speech. Next, just want to highlight, in case you guys missed it, we've talked about this briefly on previous episodes of the Maple Pill, but this isn't the only European leader, and this isn't the only politician that's been calling out Justin Trudeau. It's just no Canadian politicians will actually call him out on his BS. And again, this is one of the reasons that I'm frustrated by everyone in the Conservative Party and every single person that's currently running for the Conservative Party leadership, is because they seem to only be fair weather friends to freedom-oriented Canadians. But we covered this in the past. This was Finnish politician Laura Huhtasaari. So again, she called out Justin Trudeau. So if you guys want links to all these different videos, this was the Romanian MEP. So again, a member of European Parliament that was calling out Justin Trudeau. We've also got Indian politician calling out the hypocrisy on Justin Trudeau and civil rights. So definitely just a quick reminder that, you know, at least politicians from all over the world are uniting to call out Justin Trudeau. Now, again, is this to make it seem like every single politician in the world is? No, absolutely not. But it is interesting to see multiple different countries having politicians calling out Justin Trudeau. And I can't help but feel like this whole situation could have been avoided if it wasn't for Trudeau's ego. And yet, I personally feel like the reason that he decided to create the coalition or compact with the NDPs is, again, an ego play, because he wants to make sure that, one, he doesn't get voted out of power before, two, he can attach his name to some sort of legacy project so that he can pat himself on the back. And it'll probably just make it easier for him to land his, NGO or ambassadorship or wherever he goes after he's done milking the Canadian, the average Canadian citizen. Next, from Blacklock reporters, paid TV personalities for praises. So in case you didn't know, the Canadian government was shilling out a lot of money to different personalities to tweet out things, to make Facebook comments and stuff like that. So federal departments and agencies last year spent more than $600,000 on payments to tweeters, bloggers, and other social media influencers, records show. Local celebrities, including the CBC TV Dragon's Den personality, were hired to praise government's work. I just want to say, I think it's fucking gross if you're an influencer and you're willing to take the government's money and just tweet out their propaganda. Straight up. Not cool with it. And I'm not interested in being influenced by anyone that is. So again, love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions. A reminder, check out the full article on Blacklock's reporter. Next, this is going to get us into our first Black Pill story. And honestly, this is a story that I wasn't that well aware of. I knew that there was stuff going on in Ethiopia, but I hadn't really sat down and spent a lot of time. This is from the Washington Post. The world's deadliest war isn't in Ukraine, but in Ethiopia. So we've talked a handful of times about what's going on in Yemen right now, and again, how the U.S. is backing that. And it's a very weird situation, how we even got to that moment in time. And if you guys want to understand it further, what's going on in Yemen, that is, I really encourage you to listen to Scott Horton's podcast. He's got a couple episodes where they explore that. Recent episodes, I should say. So coming from a Nobel Peace Prize winner, Abiy Ahmed's call for restraint and diplomacy to end the war in Ukraine might have attracted more attention if the Ethiopian prime minister hadn't stained his laurels with the blood of his own people. Reports of hideous war crimes committed by his forces and those of Eritrean allies against civilians in the rebel northern province of Tigray make a mockery of his appeals for nonviolence in other parts of the world. So just to kind of highlight what's going on, though the war's true toll is impossible to know, researchers from Belgium's Ghent University estimate as many as 500,000 people have died so far, between 50,000 and 100,000 from fighting, 150 to 200,000 from starvation, and more than 100,000 from the lack of medical attention. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has expressed concern about possible ethnic government, and Addis Ababa has dismissed this as spurious. So again, if you guys want to just kind of understand what's going on in Ethiopia, I think this is a quick introduction to it. And again, it was just something that wasn't really on my list of attention, so I want to highlight it in case you guys hadn't been paying attention either. Next, this is from the Western Standard. CTF calls out feds for funding sex shows abroad. This is just bizarre. Now, this isn't a ton of money, but I think this really just shows where our government's at this point in time. So Canada's national debt is already more than $1 trillion, and it's going up by almost $400 million every day. $400 million every day. We're a country of what? We've got 40 million people, just under 40 million people. So think about that. Every single day, the government's going $10 more in debt. And that's $10 more that they're going to try and get from you in taxes sometime in the future. And this is actually a great article to read about all kinds of different ways the government wastes our money. But just a couple of the ones I wanted to hit here. All former governor generals, even the one that resigned in disgrace, right? The one that Trudeau appointed that had a history of abusing her employees. And we should have known better. And she wasn't even governor general for a long period of time because, you know, she abuses her employees. But all former governor generals are able to expense $200,000 to taxpayers annually, even after they are no longer in the position, up until 6 months after death. So literally, they can still charge you even when they're fucking dead. Why? I feel like only employees of the government should be able to charge us money, and we should actually still hold those employees of the government on a much tighter leash than we do. The fund spent, so this is, he also wants the Mission Cultural Fund to end as it's wasting money all over the world. So this is from the CTF, but the fund spent $8,800 in 2020 on a sex toy show in Germany in an effort to display Canadian art. I'm just going to read that again in case you missed it somehow. The fund spent $8,800 in 2020 on a sex toy show in Germany in an effort to display Canadian art. You know what? Actually, I don't even know if we need to display Canadian art. And I sure don't think we should be paying for sex shows in Germany. I feel like let Germans pay for sex shows in Germany. But maybe I'm just an old fuddy-duddy. Next, this is from Jerry Diaz. This is from CTV News about Jerry Diaz. He accepted money from COVID-19 rapid test supplier, Uniform alleges. So Canada's largest private sector union alleged Wednesday that its former national president, Jerry Diaz, accepted $50,000 from a supplier of COVID-19 rapid test kits he promoted to employers of union members, several of whom purchased those test kits. I personally think we're going to, over the coming weeks, months, years, we're going to see a lot more stories like this, and we're going to learn that there was a lot of corruption going on throughout this COVID-19 pandemic, and a lot of people made a lot of money, and they didn't really give a shit about their fellow man whatsoever. The union alleged that at some point before January 20, that's of this year, Diaz accepted $50,000 from a COVID-19 test kit supplier, which Payne declined to name and said was not a participant in the union's investigation because the company does not employ any uniform members. So understand, right now, it sounds like there's going to be no consequences to this test kit company, and they're not even being called out on it. Wouldn't you like to know if a test kit company was essentially buying off union bosses to get them to push their tests onto the unions? You know, if I was a uniform member, I would actually be demanding to find that out because I'd want there to be consequences. People shouldn't be able to just buy off my union boss. In fact, if I remember correctly, I think the union boss is supposed to work for me, the average person, not for anyone but me. Payne said Diaz then gave a uniform employee what he said was half of those funds, $25,000 on January 20th, telling the employee that it had come from the supplier. The employee subsequently filed a complaint under the Uniform Code of Ethics and delivered the money to Payne. I just want to say, like, you know, a round of applause to this uniform employee that reported it because thank you, because we need to find out more about this bullshit. And each one of us as an individual, we have a responsibility to speak truth, to call out hypocrisy and call out the bullshit that's going on in our society. And each one of us has a greater impact than we realize. And I just wanted to say again how much I appreciate this uniform employee, because how easy would it have been for them to want to just take that $25,000 and run, because Jerry Diaz was more than happy to do that. And he was at the top of the heap, right? So to go against your superior, even in a union environment, is very, very scary for the average employee, right? Particularly during a pandemic where, again, it can be difficult to get hired because we're going through an economic slump, regardless of what the government wants for us to believe through the mainstream media. So, again, I look forward to learning more about this. I hope that the test company gets called out, and I hope there's punishments for what they've done here, because this just seems like it stinks to high heaven. Next, this is from National News Watch. Ottawa issues $5 billion in greed bonds for the first time ever. And, well, I could have probably made that a black pill. I actually want to call this a clown pill because we were discussing earlier in the week that my biggest white pill story in maybe ever was the oversubscription to the El Salvador Bitcoin bond. And so we've got one country, El Salvador, which, again, not to say they're perfect, but they're launching a Bitcoin bond. And on the other hand, we've got Ottawa issuing green bonds. Yeah, I think one of those countries is a clown, and it's not El Salvador. So if you guys want to read more about the green bonds that we're issuing, link in the video description down below. Next, this is going to get us into our first white pill story of the day. The Conservatives would still maintain my support interest if they adopted defunding the CBC completely. So this is a statement from Polling Canada, and it was done by Angus Reid, March 15th, 2022. It was 3,000 people online. So again, I'm a little suspicious of a lot of these polls that come out these days, but essentially it found that 64% of respondents are in agreement with the idea of defunding the CBC completely. And hey, that's actually more than I expected. So good on you, Canada. I'm glad to hear there's actually more of us that understand how much bullshit the CBC is. A reminder, it's the same CBC that turned off comments on their articles, right? That turned off comments on their social media because they don't actually think they serve you. They believe they serve the elites. They serve the people that pay the checks or cut the checks and sign the checks, right? The over $1 billion every year that's given from the federal government, which is technically supposed to be our money, to the CBC in order to demonize their fellow citizens. So again, I found that heartwarming that 64% of my fellow Canucks are down for defunding the CBC, and hopefully someday we'll see that become a reality. This is from the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. Court facing compelling testimony from charter signatory Brian Peckford as action proceeds to strike down the vaccine travel ban. So this is something we talked about originally when the Freedom Trucker Convoy protest was beginning. And I was really excited when I saw Brian Peckford on Jordan Peterson's podcast. And if you guys haven't checked that out, I really encourage you, spend the time, go listen to Brian Peckford. Really well spoken. He's the only living signatory of the original Charter of Rights for Canadians, and he completely disagrees with what Trudeau has been doing to it, which, again, seems like a very reasonable stance. And yet, in this day and age, the mainstream media will portray you as an extremist if you believe that you're a free individual. And just wanted to highlight, though, while this is a white pill story, that this is moving forward and Brian Peckford still fighting the good fight, what is a little disheartening is when this is actually going to see the light of day in court. And I really hope that I get to take that trip in May, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The parties have agreed to the following timelines and hope to have the matter heard in September of this year at the latest. So March 11th, service of applicants' affidavits and documentary exhibits. April 25th, service of respondents' affidavits and documentary exhibits. May 16th, completion of cross-examination on affidavits. June 6th, service and filing of applicants' records. June 27th, service and filing of respondents' records. And fall 2022, the hearing. This is the current proposed timeline. So at least they're fighting the good fight. It's just probably going to take a lot longer than any of us would like to believe. But that's it for our pill stories of the day. But I want to share with you guys a meme here. So if you guys don't remember when SNL was actually funny, I swear to God, there was a time when SNL was funny, and Chris Farley and a lot of the older comedians back in the 80s and 90s had a lot to do with that. If you two keep doing what you're doing, all of Canada will be living in a van down by the river. Yep, that actually feels quite true. And Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh, I think they're going to really fuck up our economy over the next couple of years. And while I could frame that as a very black-pilled position, I actually, at this point in time, I'm like, yeah, let's just accelerate this this dumpster fire that is Canada. Let's have these bad things drive us to build good and new institutions. And so, again, there's a lot of opportunities out there. You guys have heard me go on and on about Bitcoin and the revolution that I think it's going to create in regards to financial sovereignty. Part of the way I'm trying to do my part is by having the Citadel here, right? So I bought a compound in northwestern Ontario. I originally opened it up to all of you guys if you want to move here for free. I say, if you're crazy enough to come here, I got to be crazy enough to say yes for at least a period of time where we can test things out and see what works. Not a lot of people are actually that crazy to uproot themselves, but with the coming days, weeks, months, and years that I think that we're going to see the continued erosion of our freedoms here in Canada, I hope more and more Canadians start waking up, start speaking out, start focusing on building those parallel institutions, start focusing on getting more and more of their life under their control, rather than being at the whim, the beck and call of the politicians. Again, it's so important that we take control over the trajectory of our lives, because if you're counting on the government to save you, you're in for a lot of pain. But before I wrap up tonight, I really do appreciate you guys hanging out with me. I know there's a lot of things competing for your time and attention. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. We're at I think 970 or 980 subscribers now on the channel here on YouTube. I would love to get to 1,000 before I eventually get, deleted and memory hold on YouTube. And that's just a matter of time. I think we both know that. But it would just mean a lot to me if I knew that there was at least 1,000 freedom-loving Canucks out there that subscribed to the channel before we were banished to only Rumble or BitChute. But I do upload the replays of these videos to both those platforms, and you can find links to those channels in the video description down below. If you guys want to follow along with me and my opinions on Instagram, it's Matt McKeever Unfiltered, and essentially it's just a lot of memes and shit posting, but I find it cathartic. Hopefully you guys do too. And I really appreciate you guys making this a two-way conversation. So I'm going to pull up the chat here, see what you guys had to say. And if you got any hot takes, let me know in that chat section right now. We've got Rise Above. I'm just following that thumbnail. My heart will go on Trudy. Yeah, I think that, again, those memes, right, of Justin Trudeau and Jagmeet Singh, they really do make my day. Hungarian Experiment, everything looks and sounds good here. Awesome. Glad to hear that you guys were along for the ride. Again, I don't know what happened with StreamYard there at the start. Graham Griffin, hey. We got Danny, hey crew. Benjamin, you remind me to the blue Power Ranger. I'll take that. I haven't thought about the Power Rangers in a while, but I am rocking that blue on blue. Danny, 500, LOL, that barely fills my truck. Well, you got a bigger tank than me, Danny, if that's the case. But yes, I wouldn't literally be able to drive from here to London on $500 of gas, or just barely. I might be able to. But yeah, $500. It'll make a lot of people smile for a day or a week, but that money is quickly gone, and inflation is here to stay. So unless the government's plan is, well, then next year we'll give you 1,000, and the year after that it'll be 10,000, and yeah. They're never going to catch up with inflation if their goal is just to give you money. That's just That's not how economics works. Rat says, Matt, since you've sold real estate portfolio, where are you storing that money to preserve its value? Stocks, gold, land? Yeah, great question, Raz. And I'll spend a little bit of time on this. First things first, I don't think it'd be wise for anyone to disclose where they store all of their net worth. So again, just food for thought there, particularly if we do find ourselves in trying times in the future. I've got no crystal ball, so I can't predict what happens, but I think it's wise at this moment in time to be diversifying where you store your assets and where you get your income from. For myself personally, I have divested from my real estate portfolio. I did buy the Citadel, so I own this 20 acres in northwestern Ontario. I like that for a multitude of reasons. One, I love that, it's a waterfront property. Two, I love the fact that the waterfront we're on is a giant lake with tons of fish. So that to me is a form of diversification. There's wildlife everywhere, so it's pretty easy to bump into partridges on the property as well as deer. So again, multiple food sources. And we're going to be building some gardens and things like that. I'll be investing a decent chunk of money into just fixing up this property. So right now there's 9 different dwelling units on the 20 acres, and 5 of those are in various states of disrepair. So looking forward to injecting some capital and fixing it up there. Eventually, I plan to host, events or experiences, open up, staying here at the Citadel on test runs for people and stuff like that. So while I don't see this necessarily as a for-profit motive, it's also not a charity. So it's kind of in one of those, like, the goal is to be a break-even business. So that's kind of what I'm doing in regards to this property. Then beyond that, accidentally, and honestly, part of it is accidental. I've got a lot of my money tied up in the crypto space right now. So I think Bitcoin is fantastic for storing wealth, right? If you've got a low time preference for that wealth, I think it's a very smart move. If you don't need to touch it for a couple of years, you should really educate yourself about Bitcoin. And if it makes sense to you, I think you should start stacking lots of sats. And if not lots of sats, at least stack some sats. Tangentially speaking, I stacked 100 million sats today. So again, big proponent for Bitcoin, and I encourage you guys to go down the orange pill rabbit hole as well. Beyond that, I do have a pretty large NFT portfolio. And I wanted to get big into the NFT space. I see a lot of opportunity there. There's obviously a potential for financial rewards, but I really see unique communities and engagement and opportunities and businesses sprouting up in that space. To me, it's like it's a crazier opportunity than anything I saw with YouTube or real estate investing. In fact, I'm going to be giving like a speech to one of my teams or businesses tomorrow. And part of the speech is just me talking about, I think this is the greatest opportunity in my lifetime. And so I'm investing a lot of capital as well as time and energy into that space, exploring it, educating myself, things of that nature. However, I do think it's also wise for people to stack some physical gold, some physical silver, if you're so inclined. Again, it really depends on what you see playing out in the future. For myself, I'd love to eventually start operating under a multi-flag situation for myself personally. So I'd like to acquire real estate in other countries. So high on my personal list right now that I'm doing my research and due diligence on is potentially getting a property in one of or multiple of these places, Florida, Texas, Bahamas, and El Salvador. That's high on my list. If you guys have been going down the rabbit hole of becoming like a nomad capitalist, of, diversifying the countries that you own real estate in or where you domicile yourself, let me know in that comment section. Let me know what resources you're leaning on. I got a feeling I'll probably put together a special episode once I've done more of my own research and due diligence. I've been chatting with some of my buddies like Mike Rosehard and Andrew Hines. Both of them are similar political bents and social views as myself. And all 3 of us are very focused on making sure that we've got stable, trying to think of how to phrase this. We're focused on making sure that we've got exit opportunities. I don't know how else to say it, from Canada in case Canada decides to go full tyrant. They say you're never supposed to go full retard, but I think Justin Trudeau might be the exception to that rule, and he might go full tyrant over the next couple of years. The Hungarian experiments is Bitcoin and NFTs. Yep, that is where a lot of it is. Hey, what's up, Project LB52? That's one of the NFT businesses I'm involved in. If you guys want to check it out, there's a link in the video description down below. And reminder, that intro song and the outro song that you guys hear, as well as the Mailbag Monday song, those are actually created, performed by Dan, the NFT boy, who's my business partner in Project LB52, where what we do is create custom audio creations for you, and you guys end up actually getting to own the commercial rights to it. So I own the commercial rights to my theme song. I could go upload it on iTunes and Spotify, and in theory make money if people want to listen to it or own it. Project LB52 sharing their space monkeys. Rise Above says immediately, COVID is here forever. I hope I hope COVID policy isn't here forever. But yes, I don't think that we're ever going to get to a zero COVID strategy at this point in time. And anyone that thinks otherwise, I think, is in a echo chamber of self-delusion. The Hungarian Experiment, we should upload SOS BTC conference to this channel. Yeah, we should definitely do that. And I actually want to create a second version of that, where I see the SOS BTC conference we put together. And again, really encourage you guys to Google that and check it out. That conference was like the most basic introduction to the world of Bitcoin. What I'd love to do now is create a second conference, again, make it completely free on YouTube and other video streaming platforms, and get a little bit deeper into non-KYC, non-custodial approaches, as well as just how to try and protect your privacy when it comes to everything Bitcoin, as well as exploring things like layer 2, like what's going on with the Lightning Network right now, which I'm really excited and interested in. I've got my Lightning and Bitcoin node just over there in the corner doing its thing. But yeah, there's so much in that space, and I find myself with a finite amount of time and a lot more desires to learn about all those things. That would be cool to see. Abdul says, yeah, absolutely. Parappa, hey, Matt, any thoughts on the current real estate and stock market? Any advice to take advantage of future opportunities? Yeah, I personally, I'm of two minds when it comes to real estate, and it really just depends upon what future you think we're going to live in. Are we going to see hyperinflation and the government not have the stomach to rein it in? And if that's the case, I think real estate's going to go up a lot. If we're going to see the government try and really fight inflation, right? If we find out that we've got a Volcker amongst us, right? The head of the central bank of the United States back in the Federal Reserve back in the 80s, when he actually decided to fight inflation and jacked up interest rates. If we see interest rates get jacked up significantly over a short period of time, and if we see a recession triggered in Canada, or even, in my opinion, likely globally, again, this wouldn't only be because Canada raised rates, it'd be because the United States likely raised rates as well as the erosion of the US dollar as the world reserve currency. I could easily see real estate correcting significantly. Yesterday or earlier this week, we covered a story where I forget who it was now, but someone was predicting a 24% decrease in Canadian real estate. Now, again, no one's got a crystal ball. No one can predict it accurately. However, I do believe that it's a higher probability now than probably ever before in my real estate investing journey or career that we're going to experience significant volatility. Now, again, whether that volatility is up, down, or maybe it's up and down and all over the place, who knows? But I think what you can do to put yourself in a better position is don't speculate, have multiple exit strategies when it comes to the real estate that you invest in. And then finally, invest for cash flow, right? Because you can weather a lot of storms if you're investing for cash flow. However, if you're taking a long-term buy and hold approach to real estate investing, I really think it behooves you to start getting involved in local policy and really start getting involved in organizations like the Ontario Landlords Watch here in Ontario, where you need to start fighting for landlords' rights. Because I think we're going to see more things like rent control pushed as real estate continues to become more unaffordable in Canada. And again, even if we experience a significant recession, I could see a lot more regulation pushed upon us, even if real estate prices are falling, because it's still going to remain unaffordable, because the reason it's going to fall is because payments are going to go up and debt servicing is going to go up because interest rates will likely be going up at that moment in time. Rise Above says, Big Daddy government going to fix it all and massage our feet. Yeah, that's the dream that they constantly promise us. Farzana, that speech by Trudeau is a farce, completely BS. He did exactly what he said shouldn't be done. He's got to be crazy. He talks and probably believes he's like Captain America, but the dude is delusional. Yeah, I think that he's probably drank all his own Kool-Aid. he could be an evil genius mastermind, but I'd much more likely just subscribe to incompetence and delusions of grandeur versus grand conspiracy theories at this point in time. Thanks, Matt. Good night, everyone. Appreciate it, Danny. Bravo, my Croatian brother. Absolutely. That was fantastic to hear that member of European Parliament call out Trudeau. Good night, everyone. We'll catch the rest on replay. Please don't forget to hit the like. Absolutely. I really do appreciate when you guys smash that like button. What a joke that guy is. Yes, Peter, repost the SOS BTC video. Sahir exploring who Satoshi is priceless. We also did a couple little memes and little skits in regards to that conference, and I definitely enjoyed the stuff Shahir participated in. Until reporters and politicians start disappearing for their actions, this is not going to change. Yeah, and obviously you don't want to incite violence on YouTube because that's a quick ban hammer, but I think there needs to be consequences, right? And the first consequence that we're all capable of implementing is social consequences, right? Like, refuse to have dinner with tyrants. If you have a member of parliament that's in your family or in your social circle and they literally support the tyranny that we've experienced over the last 2 years, you need to socially ostracize them. The same way that they're more than happy to socially ostracize us, and then through policy ostracize us, we need to actually start fighting fire with fire, in that opinion, right? That's why the parallel institutions, that's why like homeschooling your kids, that's why all these things are so important. Because it's not enough for us just to simply complain at this point in time. We need to back up our complaints with actions. Don't become a customer of companies that don't respect you, right? Don't play into their hands. Vote with our wallets, vote with our voices, and hopefully over time, we'll really start to see those consequences play out. Thank you for the great content. Appreciate Sandra. Good news, Bear. What Trudeau has coming for Canadians, no Canadian of any heritage will survive. Labor, social services, and financial service legislation will all have to have vaccine to take part in life in Canada. I think there's a great risk of that, Good News Bear. And actually, one thing I've been meaning to ask, are you like a bear from Beartaria? Let me know sometime because I'd just be curious. And if you are, definitely hit me up on Telegram because I'd love to connect with other bears from Beartaria, supporters of Owen Benjamin. They are Canadian. Don't forget that Superman's son is bisexual. Yeah, the corruption of our culture is very obvious in this moment in time. And again, that's why I think like new shows like this, even if I'm only streaming to a few dozen people, even if only 100 or a couple hundred watch the replays, that's important to me because it's at least me voting with my actions, right? I'm trying to create common knowledge as game theory would dictate that I'm not okay with this. It's okay for you not to be okay with this. You're not alone. You're not crazy. And I encourage you guys to reach out to others in your network and let them know they're not crazy as well. But yes, back to your original point there, Good News Bear. I think that we need to be very careful and watch very closely what plays out over the coming years in regards to policies. And if we continue to see ourselves nudge towards tyranny, and I think that we will, and it's not going to look like, goose-stepping Nazis or, communist fascists marching down the streets. It's going to be more rules and regulations around banking, right? It's going to be more rules and regulations around the free mobility and free speech of the average Canadian. We already see this with a lot of the hate speech laws that they're trying to implement in Canada, some of the restrictions on Canadian media, right? They want to classify this YouTube video as Canadian media, and then through that, they can essentially, attack me from another vector. And I think we all need to really pay attention to that. And if you think it's going to get worse, I think you need to educate yourself about the other solutions available out there. Things like Bitcoin, things like homeschooling, things like homesteading, building local networks, building closed loops or closed economies, getting into the barter and trade economy. Because again, we've already seen that Trudeau is more than comfortable essentially icing out or forcing out political opponents of his from the general economy and from the banking and financial institutions. I don't see any reason to believe that they won't use that tool again in the future. Again, maybe they could pass a law saying we fucked up and we will never, ever, ever do that again. But I'm not going to hold my breath for that. And I'd recommend you guys don't do that either because you'd probably die. because again, I don't think they give two shits about us. Let's take the chat off there. But again, appreciate you guys watching me. I know there's a lot of things competing for your time and attention. So the fact that you're willing to hang out with me means a lot to me. And we'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And that's it for me. Hope you guys have a good night. And again, just a reminder, you're not alone. You're not crazy. And we will eventually win this because I'm just going to refuse to lose.
Asking blue pill, red pill, corporate press, I've had my fill. I'm just a simple chat, believing in my own will. Web fire, math table, scheming, this is no drill. Haters masking boosted, but still with no chill. Need to come and take it if you wanna mess with my hill. We've been 3D printing, setting